So hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Benaroya. I'm a senior at Rutgers Business School, and I'm double majoring in finance and business analytics. And I'm also part of Women Build, which is a program that helps women who are undergraduates at the business school learn how to be leaders. So thank you for attending the panel on Are We Caring Enough About the Impact of Caregivers? So moderating the panel, we have Professor Kaplowitz, the co-founder and executive director of Rutgers Center for Women in Business, as well as an associate professor of professional practice in the finance and economics department at Rutgers Business School, where she leverages over 25 years as an investment banker and CFO. And as a current student of hers, I can attest to her ability to bridge the gap between industry and academia. So our panel includes Dr. Heggeness, an associate professor of public affairs and economics at the University of Kansas, formerly a principal economist and senior advisor at the U.S. Census Bureau. Her new book, Swiftonomics, if anyone's a Taylor Swift fan, Women in Today's Economy, will be released in 2025. Next, we have Mindy Ryan, who's up here on Zoom. She has over 24 years in the pharmaceutical industry and is currently a senior account manager at Sanofi Vaccines, where she also serves as the North American lead for the Caregiving Employee Resource Group for Sanofi North American. And finally, we have Dr. Bhagyashree, a tenure-track assistant professor of human capital development at the University of Southern Mississippi. Her research explores career development and research and leadership development, especially pertaining to women and Gen Z. So to me, this is an incredibly exciting topic, as I've always heard stories about companies, and sometimes they didn't even have very good culture, but they built lifetime loyalty from their employees because, you know, they paid the cost of when their child was sick, right? These things that like epically changed the lives of these employees and made them loyal forever. So I think that this panel is really exciting because, one, it will help humanize the workplace, but it can also be used as a tool to retain employees long term. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Professor Kaplowitz.
Hi, thank you all for being here. We are really excited about this session, and we really want to make it interactive. So feel free to jump in, ask questions. We're pretty adept at monitoring the Zoom online as we are in person. And this is a hybrid panel. You know, we're not just talking about moms or even just parents. Caregiving is much greater than that. However, the lion's share of the work does still fall to women. You know, I talked about earlier today, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the inequities for women, especially caregivers. 3 million women exited the workforce. We were at 1980s employment levels. But now we are almost at the lowest gap in participation. And this is especially true for moms with kids under 5, right? I think we're higher than we've ever been. She's the data expert, so. And so what we're going to do is we're going to provide an overview of the research that exists. We're going to talk about it from an industry perspective, and we're going to really dive into it all. So talk about your latest research, social identity, mom's impact of COVID-19.
Sure. So I'll start out with caregiving in the women's context, especially from the social identity theory that is our latest exploration. Because like the social identity is nothing but like just a concept where we all as human beings, we know that we want relationships to thrive. We want relationships to at least validate our experiences, our existence overall. So those relationships are what help us shape who you are as a person, who you are as a part of the community, and even who you are as an individual. What do you identify as? So, and first, starting with like the identity theory, just like trying to understand who you are, and then going into the social identity theory, it just helps you understand that, okay, what is my role in this context? So from the women's context, definitely, there is an extreme tension between their two main identities that they want to be striving for or want to be identified as. Number one is their identity, their gender role identity, which includes being a mom, being a wife, being a daughter, being a sister. Each of these relationships also brings in its own weight, which women have to, one way or the other, manage. And this entire conference has been so enlightening to just bring up all of those issues, and all of the different panels have brought that out in one way or the other. And their other identity is when they go into a professional workspaces, and now they want to see themselves as leaders. But because they do not know which identity to give importance over, there is this constant tension between their leader identity and their individual gender role identity. As a result of which, they just cannot move forward. You know, it's like accelerating and braking at the same time, and the car is just staying still in the same place, not moving at all. So through this perspective, what we have now tried to do is we are trying to understand women's perspective with their leadership roles and their leadership experiences with the help of interventions such as mentoring or networking. Because now again, network plays such an important role in bringing them another social platform to look at themselves through a leadership perspective or through a professional perspective and really develop their professional identity. So here now, whenever they are in a network of other women, other successful women, and they want to emulate those behaviors, the networks play a very big role in helping them develop those social identities in social organizational contexts or social networks within the organizations. And then so this is what we are now trying to just learn. And what we have identified is definitely women experience more success, their achievement in organ, or even their motivation to lead social leadership and even effective leadership. Both of these have seen an increase. So there is like a definite correlation between positive interventions that can help women advance in workplaces. And again, like this is from an academic perspective where we just, collect data or at least review the existing data that is already available and published. And I guess like I can use the stage here to just make a call for industry leaders such as all of yourselves to see if the interventions that you are using in your organizations are they having those kind of positive impacts or those kind of positive effects on women and their leadership identities. The other population that I would also like to bring up here is the Gen Z population, which is my other area of interest. And it is extremely shocking for me to even understand that the US, especially because of the pandemic, there are over 3 million Gen Z individuals who have been forced into caregiving responsibilities. And now when the pandemic occurred, the Gen Z, especially the ones who were in college, graduating out of college, Gen Z happened when they were just get on the cusp of achieving career advancement or even their career ambitions. But because of the pandemic, so many of them had to put those efforts into getting a very positive career experience to a backseat because now maybe somebody in their family needs caregiving. And the unfortunate part about this is that Gen Z do not even recognize this as caregiving activities. They just think that they're helping out a friend. They just think that they're helping out their family. They're being good children, good citizens because they're just, fulfilling responsibilities that they're supposed to fulfill. But as a result of which, of course, that has an effect on the economy, that has an effect on their personal career aspirations. And so we need more empirical evidence actually about how much of an impact, but we just know the statistics about Gen Z and the effects that the pandemic specifically had on their caregiving activities and their career aspirations.
We're going to dive into some more questions in that in a second, but I want to get to Misty. I'm going to throw up the slide.
Okay, so I will just start by saying I can't give this talk without throwing up a Taylor Swift picture, but these women and the young women of today are vibrant and passionate not only about themselves and their friends and their careers, but also about their partnerships that they build and they're establishing. And they do not believe that once they enter into their career and have established their career and established a relationship, that caregiving of small children should interfere with their career momentum. You can switch it. So I'll also just say that the generation of young women today really understand this dynamic that in order to thrive in their careers, they need to be resilient and they need to be adaptable. And you know, we all know the story of Taylor Swift's career and how she totally shifted the music industry, and she has always been very adaptable in figuring out a way to let her talent shine, even when faced with adversity. So I want to point out 3 books that I think are really, you know, they're not classics right now because they are recent, but they will become classics in understanding this shifting dynamic that we are experiencing today. The first one is Heather Boucher's Finding Time. And this book was published a handful of, I think in 2018, but it really talks about shifting dynamics in the economy that we live in and how households experience their own economic life and how they balance that with their work life. And the kind of nugget that sticks out for me in this book is just identifying the fact that we no longer live in a traditional 1950s society where households can thrive off of one income. So today more than ever, in order for households to thrive, including middle income and upper middle income households, it requires dual earner incomes. And that has put a real squeeze on families' ability to manage and balance caretaking within the home with their jobs and employment. And that in particularly a squeeze on women today. Career and Family, Claudia Golden, Nobel Prize winning Claudia Golden, really speaks to the previous slide that I had up about the women of today, because this book walks through century-long journey of how women have experienced the world outside of their home. And Claudia speaks about the younger generation of women today who really don't believe, as prior generations did, that you had to chunk up your life cycle in terms of career and family. You know, you'd leave career to start a family, and then maybe you'd go back. Women today want the career and the family simultaneously. So again, the stress. And Already Toast is just a great storyline about how, you know, in the US, we don't have systems of support when people are dealing with, so this is written by Kate Washington. She had 2 small children and her husband got cancer. And so she talks about her story dealing with trying to handle her husband's treatment, et cetera. And I will just really quickly say that I've been doing a lot of work on research in the pandemic. You know, since the pandemic started, a couple of things that stick out. Women have been extraordinarily resilient. A lot of the traditional thinking that we have in our head about the ways that women interact with the labor market have been totally flipped and have not kind of come to fruition. Women did not all of a sudden drop off the cliff and never return to the labor market. They actually, mothers returned faster than college-age women, women of retirement age. Mothers were back to their pre-pandemic trends 1 year after the pandemic. For college-age women and retirement age women, it wasn't until 2 years after. And there's a lot of kind of lessons to be learned around the role of telework, maternity leave. Maybe I'll save those for our discussion. But needless to say, the fact that women have been so accelerated in returning back to work and have the highest labor force participation rates today than we've ever seen documented in data means that we're all exhausted.
Totally. I think that's so important, the exhaustion part especially. And maybe we got sick of listening to Baby Shark so much, so it made us go back to work even faster than everyone. But really interesting stuff, and we are going to unpack it a lot as well. Mindy, talk to us about your role at Sanofi in addition to your J job.
So I have a day job of, I'm an account manager. I work with lots of health systems, but I am the North American lead for the Caregive ERG. So that's kind of a different ERG than a lot of companies have. It's basically designed for groups of caregivers and people who support caregivers And it's basically a safe place of peer support and access to practical information. It's a place for us all to gather and swap stories and ideas and information of what we've been through with people who are going through it at that point in time. And it's just designed to be a safe and comfortable community where we can talk and be more confident with the information that others have given us, because they've already made these caregiver decisions before, have been down that road, and now we can share information that they've used. And it gives us the opportunity to be more whole and balanced when we are at work, because we have the opportunity to talk it out while we are at work and not kind of have to hide that part of ourselves who's a caregiver, but nobody can know we're a caregiver, because then our boss will judge us and our peers will judge us. So it's the opportunity to be able to be out there with our whole entire self. And so we kind of have what we've adopted as a motto from, it was First Lady Rosalind Carter put out a statement, or put out a quote, and it just says, there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. That's pretty true. So you talked a little bit a minute ago about it's mostly women, and that is very true. We have about 675 members, so we're a really large ERG for a company, and 74% of our members are women. But we do have some very active men who generally care for their mothers, but we find most of our employees are caring for aging parents. Is what we're looking at, but it is by and large women.
No, that's really interesting. Victoria, can you put up that last slide? And that's a great, first of all, I think that's amazing that you all have a caregiving ERG. And we did some research at the Center for Women in Business, and we actually analyzed, we flipped the script. What do caregivers bring to companies? Your employees that are also caregivers, what are they actually adding as value to your own organizations? Is it popping up or no? There's one more slide after that. There should be. Unless I messed up. There it is. I don't know if you can see it. It might be a little bit of an eye chart, but we identified 18 different skills that employees get, not from their work experience, but from their lived experience as a caregiver. As a parent is caring for, a disabled person, is caring for a parent, etc. And we lumped them into 3 categories: humanity, productivity, and cognitivity. We coined a new term, cognitivity, borrowing off the cognitive labor at home, right? That emotional and mental load. And what we found was that there was a correlation and there's a connection between these skills and increasing retention, increasing culture, and ultimately increasing the bottom line of a company. So not only is it the right thing to do, but it's actually a good business decision to make sure that you are supporting and providing this flexibility to your caregivers as well. This study was in HBR, so it's accessible to all of you, which is really interesting, which I just wanted to make a point that, we have to also look at the why. I think that helps companies and organizations to also justify in their minds, right? Why we need to do this. So, Bhagyashree, I want to go back to you for a second, because you talked about the need for women to, have these social networks, et cetera. How has that changed during the, in a hybrid or remote work environment?
It is definitely a challenge because of the hybrid environment, because see, again, like, we are all like social beings, like we are social creatures, and a lot of people, like, I have heard like a lot of mixed responses from participants whenever they talk about their experiences with hybrid work. And it's not just from like a research perspective, but it is also like just general conversations when you have with people who are given a choice whether you want to come back to work or whether you just want to stay at home. So it's like mostly people are saying that, okay, flexibility is the best thing that is going to happen for them, right? But then they also lose out on the social networks that they could have had if they were in a regular workspace. And also going back to Gen Z women, also specifically speaking, Gen Z overall as a generation is just wanting that social contact. And they have grown up with social media, which of course is putting them away separately. But then those were the people, that was the population. We were so shocked to find that they could not wait to go back to work. They were like, I don't know what to do, because again, like they graduated from their universities online, virtually. So they began a career virtually. They never really got an opportunity to understand what a workplace looks like. What are the norms that I should be using?
We
in the
talked about that in
workplace?
class, actually,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
week.
And then Gen Z women, like even like when you go into it from a more racial perspective, when you look at it from an intersection of race. So here, like there are Gen Z Indian women that I have spoken to who have told me like, oh, I'm just doing this right now because I don't know, but then I'm gonna get married and then my life is gonna change. So there is that inherent conditioning that they go into their careers with, which needs a little bit of a change or a flip. And I guess like social networks, organizational social networks are going to be extremely critical for that. Because this younger generation, this younger population that is in the workplace, they need to see that no, the things that you want to get from your career is possible. When we talk to these older women, when we talk to more successful women, when you're mentored by somebody who has been in the industry for years together. So definitely like the hybrid workspace, although has created a lot of opportunities for women's success in their careers, because there were other panels where we have heard about like how now the person is getting judged just based on their performance. And the gender part of it is not really getting that much attention, but their performance is getting a lot of attention and they're getting appreciated for that. But the social network that they would need in order to be successful, to get to know other people, get references, make acquaintances with, other people in other departments, that part is something that people are missing a little bit.
And Misty, within your group, within your Mindy, sorry, Mindy. I'm like looking at Mindy and Misty's like, what are you talking about? Mindy, within your ERG, how are you developing social networks in this hybrid environment? Because especially for caregivers, that support is so necessary.
Yeah. We found during the pandemic and afterwards, we have monthly coffee chats, and those numbers went up exponentially. So we have very regular membership on our coffee chats. And one thing that we're working to develop right now is a list of where everybody is logistically. If you work at one of our New Jersey or Cambridge, Massachusetts, or if you're in the field like I am, like where everybody is logistically, so that you can call another member and say, hey, I live close to you, can we meet somewhere and have lunch? Just a way for people to connect one-on-one with somebody who understands where they are in their life.
I think that's so important. And I don't think that's just for caregivers. I think as women, I think that's so critical. Just to get out of the house. I mean, you can't wear the pajama pants we gave you, but you're gonna have to put on some real ones. But I think that that's really, really critical. Thank you. Misty, talk to us about, and I know you were about to go there. Talk to us about some of the future research, especially with respect to caregiving that you're doing.
Well, so I'm currently working on this project where we're looking at the changes that happened when the pandemic hit in terms of fertility. So there's already research out there showing that there's a certain segment of the female population that increased births during the pandemic. But we're looking at, of those women, what happened or what's going on with their labor force participation. And so essentially, so I think there's space to look at like how are fertility patterns changing as we move forward, given this kind of shift in flexibility of work. How are caregiving roles within the household changing? So are people shifting? There's research that men increased domestic work during the pandemic. Women hours of unpaid domestic work went up higher than men's, but that men increased domestic work. So, you know, for me, the next generation of research in terms of like the gender wage gap and reducing gender inequalities in the workspace has everything to do with the home and really nothing to do with the workspace anymore. So we've spent a lot of decades really focused on mitigating overt sexism in the workplace, but we really just ignored all the stuff that goes on in the home that really creates undue burden and unequal work. It's also work on women. And so I think when we're thinking about what is the type of research that we need going forward, it's really how can we make employers and companies more aware of the inequalities in home and how that hinders their employees' ability to be productive and their employees' ability to thrive at work.
I think that's so important. And I actually did a TED talk on this about advancing women by redistributing the housework one son at a time. It started with our teenage sons. And it incorporated some of the work we did in the pandemic, is what you were saying. Men started to do more. Women were still doing even more. But what we found is for every 1% increase that a man does at home, we looked at heterosexual to family, two parent households. And for every 1% increase, she reported that she was twice as productive and almost 1.5 times as satisfied in her paid work, which again, kind of like, duh, we all know that, right? If they would just freaking do more at home, we'd be much happier. But now there's statistical data that proves it out.
So I'm Mindy's colleague. My name is Naima Blakely. And one of the things that I want to throw out to you guys, and I'm sure you're going to mention it, so
But maybe not, so throw it out.
I think there needs to be some research just about how the employer benefits as it relates to caregiver leave impacts people's ability to take it. So at Santa Fe, I manage all of the leave of absence policies. And so since the pandemic, we increased our caregiver leave from 10 paid days to 20 paid days.
Yeah, and that was part of Naima. That's one of the main things that I was we're gonna talk about that too, because that is such an employee retention part as well. From the caregiver conversations. Yeah. I'm glad you're there. I was gonna give you a shout out. Hey.
Hi. And one of the things that we realized is that I feel like the 4 weeks is generous, but I think that there's more that we can do. Specifically us being a global company. So I get some of the feedback from people. And one of the things that I have to grapple with is an employee calling me saying that they need to go to another country to take care of their family. And when it was 10 days, that's just, getting to the airport.
Right.
So because most of the decisions now are based globally, we have to get their blessings and approval, and we have to do what makes sense and what makes sense for the business and moving forward. But I would like to see that time really increase because everybody's dynamics is different, just in the world and the climate today, and how all of this stuff has happened in other countries and people and here in the U.S. being impacted. So if it hasn't been thought about, definitely look at slice that data to see how pay for caregiver leave will impact some future dynamics of research.
Yeah, so I'm used to talking about, so I'm an economist by training, for better or worse. And so I'm used to talking about these type of issues in terms of like the larger economy. But it also is totally true for employers. And so, I think the correct way to think about investing in childcare and investing in some of these family policies is to tie it to, I'm in the state of Kansas where I work and now live, but it's to tie it to economic growth and development. So when we're talking with the legislature, it's really like we are, half of the population is women, lots of people have babies and have families. Baby boomers are getting old. My mom, like every other month, is talking about coming and moving next door to us because she can no longer live. Like it's a whole, there's, we live in families, we don't exist alone. And so we're really shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of economic growth and development if we're not providing structural systems that allow employees to more efficiently provide care for their families. And the same goes for employers as well. So just in terms of thinking about employer-based family policies, you know, there might be, we tend to be very short-sighted in our thinking about this, and we just look at what's the cost of that right now, instead of what is the cost of the lost productivity of that employee over the next 5 years, because this is an issue that's real for them happening right now and is made more complicated because we don't have a set of policies within our organization that help them resolve that issue more quickly. So I agree, there's a ton of research that could be done in that space and needs to be done.
And then some of this came to thought for me, and I'll be brief. So our policies again are very generous. So we give employees 14 weeks paid leave for a childcare leave. And if I think about that, so I did just think about it, and I'm like, well, why do you get so much time to care for an infant? Because the work to care for an aging parent is equal to or more than an infant. I'm not saying, I'm not discrediting anything, but I think in the scope of being more generous, I'm not saying people should get 14 weeks. I'm just saying it's a little bit interesting, the gap, the 10-week gap, and the amount of time you get to take care of a newborn and to take care of an aging parent or a sick parent or a sick child or whatever the case may be, because that work, the motherhood journey is generally joyful. The expectation of taking care of an aging or sick person comes with an emotional component that's usually not pleasant.
Right, Laura.
Yeah, to add on to what we've been talking about, right? In my institution during the pandemic, they kind of tried to compensate childcare expenses during the pandemic, but they didn't do anything for care, taking care of your parents. There was no compensation provided. But that is a generation that really needed support during that time. So there was no provision for providing, some kind of home care support when you had to be away or something for caregiving. That didn't happen. So that is an area that we may have to think about. And especially if you have parents who live abroad, like me, and we were cut off by COVID. We could not travel. There was a travel ban. We could not go and take care of our parents as well. And the first thing, the moment the ban was lifted, the first thing we could do was go and bring our mom here. We had to literally uproot her and bring her here because there was no possibility of us traveling back and forth. There was no provision within the organization for me to take extended periods of time for traveling. So I mean, I don't think we are very considerate on a lot of levels, and that's that. Third, I have a beef with a lot of caregiving because whenever we talk about women, we place motherhood as an important aspect, right? But there are a lot of single women, right? So what are their responsibilities? What are their needs in terms of support? There's not much being done, and again we get into the stereotype. Women, the other side of it is motherhood, right? Now we see there is a global studies showing that more and more women are single, choose to be single, or choose to be single for a longer period of time. They're postponing their marriage or that singledom. We don't do anything for, like, sometimes I with whatever disagreement I have with Bill Maher, I think that we need to do more for people who are single because we use less resources on the country, but we don't get anything back, right? We don't get any tax benefit. We don't get anything, any kind of support. We burden the system less, but we are penalized more.
I 100% agree with her.
Yeah, I think that conversation is probably outside the scope of this panel.
It is.
Given that it's focused on caregiving. I hear you.
No, I'm saying
I
like
see you.
single women also have caregiving responsibility.
Yeah.
So when we talk about
we support other
women, we
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
motherhood
Well,
and caregiving.
Well,
I'm
so
saying
that's why, totally agree. And that's why when we designed this panel, it wasn't just about being a mom. And when we did our study, we actually, I'm going to embarrass you for a second, but we actually opened and closed the Harvard article with James. Because we wanted to make sure that, I mean, James just happened to be one of the people who completed the research study, but we wanted to make sure that we wanted to highlight not just that it was parents, not just that it was moms, but there were also men. And we wanted to we intentionally did that with a story from a man to normalize the fact that caregiving isn't just a women's issue. Even though 76 or 74% of your caregiving ERG, Mindy, is women, but the more that men can role model this behavior and publicly announce that they're doing this in their companies, not to get a gold star, but just because it is who they are and they authentically believe that this is what they should be doing, to share in the care, not help. The more we can normalize it. And you're absolutely right. Not just parents, but you might be caring for a sibling, or you might be caring for your parent
Or a grandparent.
or a grandparent, right? If you're so lucky, right? So I think those are all really important questions. Mindy, what benefits have you seen, and maybe we just talked about it, that are most impactful for caregivers?
I was gonna say, yeah, Nahima did just cover several of them, and to the point that was made earlier during the introduction, and what Nahima kind of just was going over, that our benefits do create a lot of employee loyalty because we have really good benefits. So one of the things, the caregiver leave, when it went from 10 to 20 days, is phenomenal. That is very helpful. I will say one of the things that makes it a little bit difficult is navigating the policy and the program to do that. Nahima and I have a call next week to go over that, to hopefully put out something to the caregivers of a ABC 1, 2, 3, because it can create some frustration for people when they're trying to go through the documentation. But we do have all the FMLA and the leaves of absence. And when I was getting ready for this, that I also noticed the child care leave, which is 16 weeks, 14 which are paid. But you do take into this conversation that was just going on, I am not a caregiver for children. I don't have children. I'm a caregiver for my husband and a part-time caregiver for my mother. So it just so happens that if you're a caregiver for your spouse, as your parents age, you also wind up into that. So I'm a whole new kind of sandwich generation person. That's not your typical person. But we also do have military leave for military spouses, that kind of rolls into that too. And Nahima is the person who has to figure all that out and work with everybody to do it. So I'm so glad she's there. But going to the 20 days was huge for us, because you can imagine, for somebody like me, my mother has been in the hospital for a total of like 13 days this year, and my husband's been in the hospital for like a total of 4 days this year. So even having people in my family to be able to swap out with, 20 days goes pretty quickly.
Right. It does.
Oh, that's really tough. Now, I want to flip this to you all, the audience, actually. And what other research, again, do you want us to be doing? What other questions do you have that we should be digging into that could help you all support in your organizations from a caregiver standpoint? And yeah.
One of the things that I can think of is, best practices, policies that would work, and work in different contexts, like work in academia, work in organizations. I think looking at organizations that are doing very well and being able to study kind of show the impact of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out to Mindy afterwards, because I
Yeah.
think we have a case study.
Yeah.
And so no one in this room has the power to do this. Some of the complexities Mindy is mentioning without me even knowing what it is. I know what it is. And it's the federal.
You mean we are the social safety net of the country?
No, just the lack thereof, like the
Right,
federal
that-
government not making a universal leave. So some of the complexities is that, we give 20 paid days, but it runs concurrently with FMLA. It runs concurrently if you're in a state that has state leave. So when you receive it, and most of our benefits as related to leave, the majority of them are paid at 100%. I had to do a quick analysis in my head to make sure.
Yeah.
So when you're expected to get 100%, but some of it is coming from the employer, some of it is coming from the state, it doesn't speak to a true positive employee experience when you're looking for a salary continuation,
Right.
but it's coming from two separate components. But the state of state leave in the US is a mess. It's overburdensome for employers. And not that if you guys begin to include this in your research, you will never end. But if you happen to have unlimited time and resources, that would be my plug to see how or where the government is on it. We always get it on the ballot, but it never can go live. And
Right,
that's-
right.
in
Well, there's some
essence, it-
people working hard on that. I know. Rachel
Yeah,
Giuliani
I
was
would, I mean, I
really-
probably would lose my
Right.
job if they did it, but it would be something that I would welcome just for the ease of so many people. And
Yeah.
the simplification of the process.
Right, well, I think many of us are working on that.
Oh, okay.
I think it's government, so it's a slow moving process.
That's what I said.
Misty, can you talk for a second, because you're building a database, right?
Yes, a dashboard.
A dashboard.
Yep.
Can you talk about the caregiving dashboard? that you
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
You're welcome.
So we, just end of last year, got some funding from the Sloan Foundation to create a dashboard of statistics all around the care economy. So the idea is, I'm gonna just go down stereotypical lane here, but the idea is, what if in the 1940s and 50s, instead of economic statistics being developed by crotchety, old, nerdy, privileged white men, what if they were developed by caregivers? What would that look like? And so this dashboard is going to basically kind of show the economic output of caregivers, not only in their formal work lives, but also in their informal unpaid caregiving lives. It's going to show how much care and caregiving in the US contributes to GDP and to the economy in general and overall. It's a national dashboard, but we're also getting as granular as we can. So we're gonna be producing statistics at the state and local level. And the long-term vision with the dashboard is that we will get it up and running, and then we will push it into a national statistical agency like the Census Bureau. So it will become something like the BLS produces labor force participation statistics monthly. So this would become a part of that kind of repertoire. And it is just to bring awareness to the fact that so many of us live in a world and an economy that revolves around humans' ability and willingness to care for others. And we need to stop ignoring that fact. And we need to start recognizing where it adds value and where it contributes to our lives and to our businesses and to the world that we live in.
So I think that kind of gets at some of your question too, and I'm really excited to see this work being done.
I promise I won't say anything else. Last thing, long-term care insurance. It was a big thing in the industry. It has since gone away, and people cannot afford to live long lives. There's no type of benefit, no type of compensation. One of the states just implemented a state tax so you can pay for it, but it's not even, the juice isn't even worth the squeeze. That's another recommendation. The care, like the care benefits for the care receiver. You know, as they continue to age and transition.
Right.
into
That's something
specialized-
we personally started looking into as we're getting old.
Yeah.
My
can't afford
husband and I, about getting that so we don't become a burden to our children. But I think this was a really great, lively, productive conversation. I thank you all.